We're now going to be bringing in our guest as well as bringing Gavin back in, an assistant high school basketball coach, knows his way around the high school basketball, the collegiate level, as well as the NBA. Dom Amoroso. Dom, it's great to have you on, man. It's great to see you. Obviously, just being able to talk about sports times like this, our goal obviously with the show is to be able to unify and always be able to consistently just do whatever we can to keep everyone united. So it's great to have you on. Thanks for being on today.
No, thank you guys for having me on it. And, I truly respect what you guys are doing. Zach and Gavin, I've known you guys for quite some time now. And Zach, to see both yourself and your brother getting into this, sports talk industry, which before I got into coaching was something I heavily considered. It kind of reminds me of myself at a younger age. And you guys are, real good at what you do. I like the ebb and flow of your show, how you guys bounce off each other. So I'm really happy to be on.
Thank you for joining us.
Definitely great. So how we'll run it, we are going to start off talking about just high school collegiate basketball, and then I'll shift it over to Gavin. And then we do have one more topic I know we're going to speak about with you, which we planned prior to the show. Should be some quite exciting things. So I'll start off with it right now. Fortunately, because we were out of the season for basketball at the high school level now for college, we were about to go into March Madness. But let's start at the high school level. Now, off-season workouts are not uncommon for higher levels of sports. What are some things that have had to change for maybe your high school basketball programs across the country that have been affected by the coronavirus, and how have you been able to mitigate that, and how are players currently keeping in shape and making sure they're getting their practice in?
Well, the biggest thing is no AAU. This was my first year back on the AAU circuit. I took a year off between, just kind of focus on school. I'm with Philly Pride now. They're on the Under Armour Association. I'm an assistant with the 15 and under team. So the biggest thing was no AAU. Now there's, things the NCAA is working on to make up for that missed time. But that's the biggest thing. In terms of workouts, obviously here in Pennsylvania, now we're in the yellow phase. We're going into the green at the end of this week. But while we were in the red, we were doing a lot of Zoom meetings with the kids, just going over film, going over offensive and defensive stuff. A lot of our staff meetings were done through Zoom. Zoom, obviously, I think everybody's getting their best use out of Zoom at this point. But, we're kind of transitioning back into the gym now. There's obviously going to be safety protocols we have to take. But, luckily, a lot of the outdoor parks, I'm at Chichester High School, a lot of the outdoor parks in that area, the rims have been put back up. So the past 2 weeks I've been working out. Kids that play for us, socially distanced, to say the least, to comply with everything, having a kid at each basket, and myself in a mask, even though it's outdoors. I just want to be able to give the parents that peace of mind that I'm taking the right protocols to deal with what's going on right now. So in terms of off-season stuff, a lot of stuff has been remote, and in the recruiting piece as well. But the bright side is, from a coach's perspective, a lot of these coaching clinics where you spend $200-300 on to travel and get to the clinic, it was free this year. So that's kind of where we've been at off-season wise.
Great. And so how has it went for the recruiting process? Have you been getting requests for film maybe more? Maybe there's a lot more with virtual meetings. Unfortunately, coaches can't really come out and see workouts. I'm not quite familiar with the pipeline for that, but I'm curious how for maybe rising seniors who now, because they weren't able to have some of these opportunities over the summer, maybe high schools are going to be getting more visited by scouts, or there are going to be more fall and winter programs to get maybe right now rising seniors more opportunities before they're getting any offers.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. Obviously, for the kids that are bona fide Division I players, there's still some stuff they're going to miss, but not as much as a kid that's a D2 or a D3, where the recruiting opportunities aren't necessarily as big in the summer. Where you're really relying off of high school basketball. In terms of kids that I've been dealing with in the recruiting process, with a lot more requests for film. One of our rising seniors actually just took an official visit down to Hood College in Maryland. He's trying to play basketball and baseball in college. And in Maryland, I think things were a little more open, so they were able to actually have him on campus and do a visit. And they offered him, on the spot for both sports within that visit. So, like I said, everything's kind of been a lot more remote. But in terms of, the communication, it's been pretty strong. The college coaches have been excellent. And like I said, going back to the coaching clinics, a lot of these coaches have used clinics as a way to kind of, continue to put their school out there and kind of, pull back the curtain a little bit into their program. So I think, it's changed a lot, temporarily. I think everybody, keeps saying this is only temporary, which, we all like to think. There's still a lot of unknowns ahead. But in terms of the recruiting process, for most kids, I don't think, the college coaches have missed a beat with the kids they want to recruit.
Right, and so shifting it over, I just have a few more questions, more shifting into the college side now. March Madness, unfortunately, this year did not happen. We know for the reasoning very early on in March with the coronavirus and things like that. I think one game was started and was cut at halftime. And so I'm curious to hear what were you kind of seeing as a Final Four this year? Maybe potentially, I know this year there was no true dominant team, at least from my perspective, as we've seen in the past with a couple of years. Villanova a few years back was very strongly the number one team when they beat Michigan. And so UNC the year before that. So I'm curious to hear how could that have potentially shaped out this year, and what could this mean for potentially some players who were on the bubble of entering the NBA draft, or maybe doing something along those lines, maybe potentially staying another year now?
Well, to answer the first question, I probably between November and March, I changed who was going to be in my Final Four a million times. I think we all like to think we do, but some teams that I thought really had a good shot to be, in the home stretch of this thing, Florida State obviously was a team that I really enjoyed watching throughout the year and studying as a coach. Leonard Hamilton is one of my favorite coaches. He's one of the best coaches in the country year in and year out. They were 11 guys deep, as his teams always are, but they were extremely long. They could switch 1 through 5 on defense, which is something, that's becoming more and more of a trend, at the college game, because it's what's happening at the pro game, the ability to switch defensively. Florida State was a team I really liked. I put stock into Kansas every year, but they let me down. But, I liked what they had. In terms of, the quote-unquote local teams, I wasn't big on Villanova this year just because of the fact that, I think they lack, more playmakers than they usually have. But I think they'll be, in it next year. Penn State was a team that I really thought could go deep. And I was, on social media, I was really adamant about the fact that, I really thought this was a team that, maybe it wasn't a Final Four team, but maybe it was a team we could sneak into the Elite Eight. And, if they got on the right road, they could have definitely been there. Ohio State was a team as well that I liked, from the beginning of the year to the end. Coach Holtman's one of the best in the country. And Maryland as well. I'm a little biased with Maryland. One of my former college coaches, and Matt Brady, is an assistant down there under Coach Turgeon, and they have 2 local kids in Dante Scott from Imhotep Charter and Hakeem Hart from Roman Catholic. And, I was happy to see the development those guys were going through. And, I was really impressed at times with Maryland this year. But, every year with March Madness, I think it's such an open field. In terms of, next year, I think you're going to see some teams have some guys back that you wouldn't expect to be back because of the fact the NBA has extended that, deadline to enter the draft. And, it all really depends on how a lot of these programs reload.
Right, and so it amazes me every year how competitive the ACC is, and now the Big Ten is starting to get up there. I have one more question. I'm going to shift it over to Gavin. What are some of your thoughts on the increasing popularity of some of these players trying to do the G League entrance program versus college, or maybe playing international ball? For a few years, we know the separation from high school, the one and done for a lot of guys as well. What are some of your thoughts on that? And I'm sure from a lot of your high school experience, college is most likely the number one choice. But now we're starting to see some other options, some other ways of entrance into the NBA. I'm curious what some of your thoughts are. And then, Gavin, I know you have some questions as well. We'll shift it to you.
Well, it's a great question. First off, and you guys touched on it earlier in the show, Adam Silver, I think right now is the best commissioner in sports. And that's, me not just being biased as a basketball guy, but, he's very pragmatic, compared to Goodell and Gary Bettman. And, let's not get started on Rob Manfred. But, Adam Silver, has a real good pulse on things, and I think the one thing he realized with the G League, aside from the fact that a lot of these guys are itching, to get that professional experience, is the fact that, in this country right now, there's a really, there's a real high entrepreneurial spirit. You have kids coming out of high school and even early in college, starting their own business, making their own brand. And LeBron James, is an athlete, who really embodies the fact that he runs himself as a brand. He has his team of guys, the Maverick Carters, the Randy Mims, the Rich Paul, the guys that are around him for business reasons because he conducts himself as a brand. And I think a lot of players want to follow that model. And the NCAA has not been great by any means, with keeping up with the times, even though, I know there's, things out there that, college athletes are going to get paid. These kids, if they have the chance to go make, to make the money now and get developed for the NBA, the G League is becoming more and more of a viable option, so I think Adam Silver's done an awesome job, like I said, just keeping his finger on the pulse and realizing, what adjustments have to be made. And I think, you look at the Jalen Greens of the world, I think Jonathan Kuminga is going to be another one that, we see go to the G League, and they're the guys that are going to kind of spark, this rise in kids going from high school to the G League just because they can go make money and they can develop, and have a direct pipeline being, within the NBA.
Well, you're right. I'm a firm believer that they should go straight from high school into the NBA, like the old days. If you're really good enough to do that. Obviously, Zion Williamson made a lot of noise coming at. Same thing with Mikey Williams. And I have a question for you. So you see Mikey Williams a lot on social media, versus June Flight, and then you also got Bronny James. And so I want to ask you, who do you like better down the line? Do you like Mikey Williams more, or do you like Bronny James?
Well, to answer your question, straight up, I do like Mikey a little more. Neither of them are the best player in their class, respectively. If you ask me, I think the best player in this year's freshman class is depending on what you consider our backyard, but is DJ Wagner at Camden High School. I think DJ is better, than both of them. I think DJ is, one of the best players in the country, period, regardless of class. Obviously there's, legacy to that with his father being DeJuan Wagner and the grandfather being, also DeJuan Wagner. And, the kid's an excellent scorer. And, his team, in my opinion, is probably going to be one of the top 10 teams in the country next year. I'm really excited to go across the bridge and watch Camden. They're actually playing Sierra Canyon next year. I like Bronny, but, I do think a lot of his buzz comes from the fact that, his dad's the best player in the world. I try to stick to, the credible basketball sources. Gavin, I talk to a lot of different people about the game, and, just seeing on Facebook and Twitter, I'm watching Bronny tonight. Well, it's like, I get it. The kid's very talented. But, I don't necessarily think he's, the best in his class, and Mikey Williams, has obviously also garnered a lot of attention because, he keeps talking about, the potential of going to an HBCU, with everything that's going on in the current state of the world right now. Is something, that there's speculation toward, maybe the top players start going to HBCUs. Do I think Mikey's going to do that? I think it's 50-50. As of right now, I do think it'll change. But to answer your question, I do like Mikey a little more.
Well, I do too. I feel like Mikey has a more like finished, polished game almost. A few things he can work on. I think Bronny has saw like a lot to prove. He's still young. I think he's a grade below me. Another thing I want to ask you. So we talked about, you touched on college players, not getting paid. My cousin was one of those college athletes, and it's crazy because if someone hands them let's say like $200, right? Let's say like they automatically, like if you do a signing and they get paid $200 to do a signing, they automatically have a problem with it. Trevor Lawrence, to be example, Trevor Lawrence and his girlfriend started GoFundMe for something that had nothing to do with trying to fund Trevor Lawrence. So I want to ask you this: do you think that the NCAA has a problem, or should be? I don't know what the right word is. I wouldn't say kind of like crucified. We're not even crucified, but more like just pointing fingers as bad guys. Like, because every time they find out someone had money or gotten money to go to a school or did a little signing for, like, let's say $200, they tend to have a problem with it. So my question for you is, why is it such a big deal if these guys get a little bit of money for their own name?
To not to necessarily get political. I think the NCAA, has had a history, that hasn't necessarily changed of the fact that these guys are are students, not necessarily young men that are just trying to find their way in this world, and young men and women for that matter that are trying to find their way in this world and trying to make a future for themselves. And I think what's been lost sight of is the fact that to make a future in this world, you got to make money.
Yeah.
So the NCAA just hasn't been adaptive to change. They haven't been receptive to change, and it's a huge problem because there are a lot of coaches speaking out about it. There's a lot of athletes speaking out about it. There's legislature in certain states that's in the process of getting passed to make changes to allow these athletes to get paid. A majority of these college athletes in football and basketball are coming from homes below the poverty line. Whether we want to, whether we like it or not, these are young men now that that just aren't going to school to play football. They're going to school to provide for their family. They're going to school to provide a better future for themselves. And, it's what they have to do. And it's something, that the NCAA needs to respect that, not everybody is from the 1%, and so do I think Dr. Emmert, somebody to be crucified for this? Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, there's too many rules that don't allow these guys to make profit off of themselves. But the school is bringing in millions of dollars a year. Look at Penn State, for example. Penn State, the economy of State College is driven in August, from August to December by football, by the fact that, you have all these guys playing football. They can't get any of that money.
Well, I also I agree with you, and I kind of find it unfair because I want to go back to like Zion Williamson. Zion Williamson, they made a lot of money on Zion Williamson. Duke and the college basketball. Zion Williamson, they made a lot of money off Kobe White too, and R.J. Barrett, Cam Reddish. And that's just those two teams alone. And I know we got to get on to the last time. I just got one more question for you too. Who is your GOAT? Who do you think is the greatest of all time basketball player? We get into heated arguments over Jordan and LeBron. So I want to get. So what side are you on? Who do you think is the GOAT of the NBA?
Well, everybody looks at me like I have 10 heads, and I understand why. If you know me, I'm an analytics person. I'm a heavy numbers person. I think the best player of all time, to be honest with you, and I won't be surprised if anybody's eyes pop out of their heads. It's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Okay. The man, and if we're talking just the NBA, that I get it, but I look at the whole scope of basketball. The man won at every level, and he continued to have great years, won Magic was with him. Now I understand the argument of when he was dominating as Lou Alcindor. A lot of the good players were in the ABA at the time. I get that, but what's he supposed to do about that? But he's the all-time leading scorer. He won several MVPs, and like I said, the guy is a winner. I'm not saying Jordan's not a winner, and I'm not saying LeBron isn't the most talented by any means. But from my personal opinion, I've always held Kareem in the highest regard.
Interesting, Zach. You heard that, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. All right.
I've heard the debate, and I've sided with it before. And so one of my thought processes, and I bring up the 3-point line a lot as far as identifying how difficult a defense is, whether from the perimeter defense back in when Kareem played wasn't as existent. You were in the paint. Everyone's in the paint. And I remember last year watching the Sixers Raptors series. I'm not sure if you ever watched any film from that, Dom, but you take a look at a lot of these guys, and they were given. You weren't playing perimeter D on guys like Ben Simmons, and it makes sense. It's common to do that. They condensed the paint. They did something to the Sixers that no other team they had seen all season. And so I was so fascinated by it after game one. And so I was surprised the Sixers were able to rebound from that, no pun intended. But as far as talking about the condensed paint, back in Kareem's day, he had to get through so much even if they weren't as talented as they are now. And again, Like, what's he going to do about it? He's still a very talented player. So it's a legitimate argument. And so I definitely see him up there. Definitely three different opinions here. We'll have to have you on another time to
Absolutely. I love you.
You
All
know,
right,
Zach. You know what? I'm gonna let you have your opinion today because I'm not in the mood to argue goat debate. All right, we could bring Dom back for another day for that. But look,
I love you.
look, Dom, you got to come back for that because you just brought a whole new person into it. So this is gonna be interesting. But what's next? What we got for Dom next?
And finally today, Dom, known well as a Patriots fan, I'm willing to accept
Really?
that considering Super Bowl 52.
You know that,
But
girl?
talking about today, we're gonna break down, can the dynasty continue? We have about 8 minutes here to go through it. We'll go kind of like a round table. I'll start off, then go into Dom, and then Gavin. In my opinion, it does continue. Again, Dom, I know how you feel about do your job, the culture up there. I think it's not a happy place to play, but people say you want to win, you go to New England. You want to get paid, you go somewhere else. And I totally agree with it. And I respect what New England does. And even as an Eagles fan, even as a NFL fan, which means if you're not a Patriots fan, you're probably going to hate the Patriots. You hate them because they win. And so since 2000, they've been pretty much the most successful franchise, 6 rings in, I believe, 9 Super Bowls, correct? They lost 2 to the Giants, 1 to the Eagles. Let's go NFC East. But tracing it back, here's why I think they're going to continue to succeed. First of all, their defense is the best in the league. Their secondary is outstanding. I know that their linebackers this year have some of them have taken some exits, one with to Miami, but I still think that they have what it takes to really become a good squad with a great secondary. The way that those guys play, Stephon Gilmore, the McCourty twins, they have a few guys that are kind of sleepers up there. I know the guy Hardman is actually a really talented player. And so their defense is just too good to not be at least a 500 team. And you look at a dysfunctional team like the Chicago Bears, who had a bad O-line this year, and they still had a top-tier defense, and the quarterback play wasn't great, and their play calling on offense was just awful. And I went off on the Bears before on this show, but just the defense alone is going to give the Patriots at least 7 or 8 wins, in my opinion. And all that Jarrett Stidham or whoever is going to start, all they got to do is do their job. You still have James White, Sony Michel, Rex Burkhead. I'm not quite sure what the tight end is looking like right now, but I know they drafted 1 or 2, I think, actually. So, but as far as the receivers, Julian Edelman is going to be healthy this year. He was not healthy last year at all. I think that's going to be good for them. I think N'Keal Harry is able to bounce back. All Stidham has to do is fit in the system. Josh McDaniels is a very smart guy. Tom Brady, I've said this before, I don't think Tom Brady becomes a GOAT without Belichick. He now is, I think he's going to succeed in Tampa. I think that Brady has become a better player, and he can be on his own now. But before, I think it definitely was a system. Expect a lot of running the ball, a lot of screens, a lot of the basics, and that's what New England's good at. So I think that the dynasty, I'm not going to say they're going to Super Bowl next year. I think Stidham's going to need at least a year to grow. I think he is the answer, to be honest. He was at Auburn. He won the Iron Bowl. I remember very exciting watching it back then. He's not a scrub. He's not a D3 never heard of, which New England, ironically, is known to make those guys pretty good anyways. I have confidence in that team. I think that they're still going to be able to continue. Dom, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, well, my unbiased opinion is that the Buffalo Bills do win the division next year. I think, Buffalo is a team on the rise. But, to focusing here on the Patriots, in terms of Stidham, I'm not 100% sold on him. I'll have to see what he looks like this year. You have to at least give him a year. We can't jump on him and get rid of him after a year or want to run him out of town. Obviously, a lot of this draft for the Patriots was about, loading up on the defensive side of the football. And, what I would say is, it's no surprise. A lot of people thought, they were going to take Jalen Hurts, who the Eagles ended up taking. And I wanted them to take Jalen Hurts. Like I said, one thing that, sold me about Jalen Hurts is the kid's a winner. But, I'm not really surprised, that Belichick decided to go with defense in the first round, as he historically does. There's been drafts where, there's, a good offensive weapon on the board late in the first round that the Patriots should take, and Belichick goes and takes a defensive player. The one thing that remains true in New England, and I'm glad you brought it up, is culture. And it's, the mystique of what, goes on inside of, the football offices up in Foxborough isn't going to change. Whether, it continues to lead to more Super Bowls is a different story. But, I do think, it's certainly proven, in an era of, the NFL where, the salary cap is pretty hard and free agency. And, now we're starting to see the trade deadline kind of evolve a little bit more, kind of like how it has in the NBA. The Patriots have kind of remained constant and true to their formula. I think they'll be around. Do I think the dynasty continues, though? I hope it does. I don't mind a couple more Super Bowls. But if it doesn't continue, I won't be upset. I had my day in the sun as a Patriots fan. I think they'll be around though to answer the question.
First of all, I had no idea that you were a Patriots fan out here. First of all, because
Really?
I had a Cowboys fan on the show, and it was all right. I guess I had to put my differences away with them, and I got to put my differences away with you now too with that Patriots. Look, I'll be honest with you. I think the dynasty is over, but I am excited. You know why I'm excited? Because the narrative has always been: was it Brady or was it Belichick? I think it was more. I think it was both together. I think both of them need each other to complement one another. Yes, Belichick is a really great coach and a really well-minded coach, and he thinks of things and he can tear you apart. And if he knows this one guy's a weakness, he will make your day horrible. Now, here's the thing: who was that guy that made sure that day went horrible? Tom Brady. I think without Tom Brady, yes, you're not going to win as many games this year, but it's going to be great to see if it was the system. Remember, Jacoby Brissett looked amazing. Jimmy Garoppolo looked amazing. If you want to go back to Jimmy Garoppolo was supposed to be the guy after Tom Brady, but they ended up with Tom Brady. I think felt a little threatened, so they shipped Jimmy G out to town. He goes to Super Bowl and loses. Jacoby Brissett, he was a guy. Excuse me. He was a guy in Indiana. He didn't do a horrible job. But he didn't do the best. But he kept him relevant with the pieces he had around him. So now let me get back on track. I think the dynasty is over. I think there will be a new dynasty, but it's not going to be a reign of terror. I end up seeing you guys get the first pick overall, and I see you guys going out and getting Trevor Lawrence, which I would hate to see because that means you guys are going to start winning again. Now, on the other hand, I'm gonna be honest with you. The New England Patriots has been a reign of terror for long times, and Dom, and you can agree to that they've been on a reign of terror since the early 2000s. And I think the last 2 to 3 years is when we see the New England Patriots be more vulnerable than ever. As you say, I don't think now people say, well, Tom Brady lost the game in the playoffs. No, Derrick Henry happened. He hatched and he came out and he just ran over everybody. Just ask how Earl Thomas feels about that as well. Now back to the question. I do believe that the defensive dynasty is going to start because New England is never known for a great defense. They just know they had a great system where they could put it together and those players work well with one another. Now that they actually have actual real talent and Stephon Gilmore, who's arguably the best corner in the league right now. They have the McCourty brothers. Devin McCourty is a bona fide top tier free safety. And then you got to look around. All right, the linebackers aren't the worst. The front line isn't that bad either. The offensive line on the opposite side of the ball is not that horrible either. It's just the main question mark is who is Jarrett Stidham? Who is that? I never heard of him before in my life, and I know we got to go. So I'm gonna leave this. I do see the New England Patriots going 3-13 this year, and the 3 wins you're going to get. And yes, Dom, because I'm doing this because you're a Patriots fan, they're going to be 3-13 this year. They're going. I think the teams that go to the playoffs this year is one. The reason why you guys get 3 wins, you're going to beat the Jets twice because you know why? Apparently, Sam Darnold sees Casper the Friendly Ghost whenever he plays, so he's going to throw y'all the ball all day long because he can't see nobody else but Ghost. And I think the Dolphins sneak in as a wild card. That's on 9-7 with Tua Tagovailoa, and obviously Josh Allen is Josh Allen, and he's only but better. I think Josh Allen might even have a career high season in some things. So I'm gonna leave it like this. Trevor Lawrence might be the quarterback next year for New England. That's gonna be scary. That's gonna be a scary thing to think of. And I think it's more Belichick. I don't think it's one another. I think it's both together.
And then as we close up, I know we're closing on the hour. I'll close up with this for our viewers. There was one thing that really stuck out to me I found so funny this year. Whether the dynasty is over or not, Bill Belichick, I believe it was the very first question that was asked him in that press conference, the support that his fan base gave him through thick and thin. And he sat there, took a deep sigh and said, there hasn't been that much thin around here, in my opinion. So thanks to everyone for joining in today. We'll be back tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Dom, absolute pleasure to have you on. We look forward to having you on again in the future. Gavin, same as always.
Thank you.